A tourist expects a rock to do one of two things when it hits another rock: chip or stop. At Thornton Beach in far north Queensland, there is a documented exception, and by the end of this story, you will know why these stones can spring back like rubber, why scientists took the claim seriously, and why taking one home became the part people regretted. The promise sounds almost too neat. A beach in the Daintree, a handful of rounded stones, a throw against another hard surface, and then that sharp little snap, the sound your ears reject before your eyes catch up. Stone should sound heavy, final, dead. Here, under the right conditions, it can answer back. That is the Australian bouncing stone's mystery in its simplest form: just a remote strip of coast, a strange kind of rock, and a reaction so unlike ordinary beach pebbles that people argued about it for years. But the first mistake is thinking of Thornton Beach as a roadside attraction with a party trick. It sits in a part of Queensland where the rainforest presses close to the sea, where the air feels wet on your skin, and where the road itself begins to sort the casual visitors from the stubborn ones. You do not usually arrive there by accident, and that matters because the stones were never only a science puzzle. Before cameras made them famous, before geologists gave the rebound a name, this place already carried meaning for the eastern Kuku Yalanji. The better question is, what happens when outsiders treat a protected place like a souvenir box? If this kind of hidden Australian history is your thing, subscribe before we follow the stones back to where the story first escaped the beach. To understand why that question followed the stones, you have to picture how far from a casual beach stop this place really is. Thornton Beach sits north of the more crowded coastal names, beyond the easy postcard version of the Daintree, where the green wall of rainforest comes right down towards the pale sand and the sea air carries that damp, leafy smell you only get in the tropics. The road in is part of the filter. It narrows, bends, and slows you down. The sound changes too. Less engine noise from other cars, more insects, more wind in the canopy. By the time you reach the coast, the beach does not feel like something arranged for visitors. It feels like something you have interrupted. That matters for the bouncing stones, because rarity is doing half the work here. If these pebbles were piled beside a parking lot with a big sign saying, "Try me," most people would assume the whole thing was a trick, but scattered along a remote tide line mixed with ordinary-looking stones, they become harder to dismiss. You pick one up and it feels wrong only after you know what it can do. Cool in the palm, dense, smooth from water and weather. Nothing about it announces a secret. Yet, under the right strike, one stone can leap back from another with a clean, sharp report. That little sound is what turned a local oddity into a claim worth chasing. It traveled first by word of mouth, then by people daring each other to test it, and eventually by a camera crew willing to film the result. Because once the Leyland Brothers brought television eyes to that quiet shore in the 1970s, the beach stopped being just a place people whispered about and became a public challenge. The television moment changed the story because it gave the beach something folklore rarely gets: witnesses who could replay the claim. The Leyland Brothers were known for taking viewers into odd corners of Australia, and when their cameras reached Thornton Beach in the 1970s, the stones were no longer just a local dare passed along with a grin. You can imagine how it would have sounded through an old TV speaker. A hand closes around a rounded pebble, feet shift in the sand, someone throws, then comes that dry, hard crack, followed by the wrong movement. The stone comes back, rebounding with enough snap to make the people watching laugh in surprise because their brains had already predicted a dead stop. That kind of footage does two things at once. It convinces some viewers immediately, and it makes others more suspicious. Fair enough. A round stone can look too perfect. A camera angle can hide distance. A good throw can make an ordinary thing seem stranger than it is. If you have ever watched a clip online and thought, "Show me that again from the side," you already understand the problem. But the stones did not fade after that first burst of attention. People started making the long trip to test the claim with their own hands. They wanted the sound, the jump, the little shock of seeing stone behave like something softer. Once visitors were standing there, feeling the weight of those pebbles in their palms, a second habit began almost automatically. Some of them did not put the stones back. At first, that probably felt harmless, one small souvenir from a strange shore. But on a beach where the unusual stones were the whole reason people had come, every pocketed pebble changed the place a little. And soon, the missing stones became only the first problem. The trouble with a souvenir stone is that it does not feel like theft while it is warm from your hand. It feels small, harmless. A pocket-sized proof that you really stood on that far northern beach and saw something ordinary refuse to behave. Places like Thornton Beach get damaged without anyone arriving with bad intentions. A visitor bends down after testing a pebble, turns it over, feels the smooth, water-worn surface, maybe hears the surf dragging grit back through the sand, and thinks, there are plenty more. One stone disappears into a backpack. Then another, carried away in rental cars. Suitcases and kitchen drawers thousands of miles from the tide line that shaped it. For the bouncing stones, that habit created a very practical problem. The best pieces were not every rock on the beach. People wanted the rounded ones, the dense ones, the ones that gave that crisp answer when struck. So the very stones that made the place famous were also the first ones people reached for. Curiosity started acting like erosion, only faster and with pockets. Here is where the story takes its more serious turn. If the phenomenon had been only a rumor, the damage might have faded with the fashion, but the claim kept surviving inspection. Visitors kept reporting the same strange rebound. Old footage kept circulating. Skeptics could doubt the angle, the throw, the shape of the pebble, but the question would not go away. So eventually, the beach needed something stronger than a travel story. It needed people trained to look at stone without being impressed by a good trick. It needed the claim pulled out of the sand, placed under geology, and tested against the one thing folklore cannot fake for long, the structure of the rock itself. By the time geologists entered the story, the beach had already been through the usual cycle. Wonder first, then copying, then doubt. The stones had bounced for television, for travelers, for people who came home with sand in their shoes, and a story nobody quite believed. But geology is not very interested in being charmed. It asks what the stone is made of. In 1984, 3 geologists submitted a paper to the Queensland division of the Geological Society of Australia that dealt with the Thornton Beach stones directly. That detail matters. It was the moment the claim left the category of strange beach tale and entered the cooler language of mineral grains, fracture lines, and impact. Their answer pointed to hornfels, a hard, metamorphic rock. Hold that word for a second. Hornfels does not look theatrical. It does not glow. It does not need to. It forms when existing rock is heated so intensely by nearby molten granite that its internal structure changes. The rock is baked, tightened, made denser, while still remaining rock. That process is called contact metamorphism, and it is the first real key to the rebound. The investigators found that the best stones shared certain traits. They were rounded enough to strike cleanly, They were fine-grained enough to avoid obvious weak layers, and when one hit another hard surface at the right angle, the energy did not simply vanish into a dull crack. That was the part that made the old footage harder to laugh off. The beach had not fooled people with a legend. The stones had a mechanical reason for answering the throw. But the mechanism itself was stranger than most viewers expected, because it began deep underground, long before there was any beach for waves to polish. That underground beginning is the part that makes the beach feel less like a trick and more like a delayed reaction from deep time. Long before waves sorted the shore into sand, shells, and smooth, dark pebbles, molten granite pushed into older rock beneath this part of Queensland. It did not have to pour across the surface to change everything. Heat alone was enough. Around that hot intrusion, the surrounding stone was cooked under pressure from the earth above. Its grains tightened, its weak bedding faded. The material became hard, compact, and stubborn in a very particular way. Later, after weather and water broke pieces loose and rolled them toward the coast, some of those pieces arrived at Thornton Beach as fine-grained hornfels, already carrying their strange talent inside them. It is timing and structure. When an ordinary layered stone is hit, tiny weaknesses inside it steal the force. The energy becomes a chip, a crack, a dull thud in your hand. But a dense, rounded hornfels pebble can do something cleaner. If it strikes another hard stone squarely and fast enough, it briefly stores part of that blow and sends it back as elastic rebound. Dropping one from a lazy height is usually disappointing. The famous jump needs the right stone, the right surface, and the right angle. Too flat, and it skids. Too layered, and it fails. Too soft a target, and the force disappears into the sand with a little puff of salt dust. There is a small warning hidden in the science. A stone that can return energy can also return toward the person who threw it. The same snap that made television viewers laugh could sting skin, break sunglasses, or turn a beach experiment into a very quick regret. Which is why the next part of the story matters so much. Thornton Beach had rules attached to it long before anyone arrived to test the physics. Those rules did not begin with park signs or warning tape. They belonged to the country itself and to the eastern Kuku-Yalanji people who knew this coast long before outsiders arrived with cameras, sample bags, and questions about why a stone could jump back from another stone. Thornton Beach was recognized as a women's business site, connected with restricted law and ceremony. That does not mean the private knowledge should be unpacked for a curious audience. It means the opposite. Some places carry rules because not everything important is meant to be handled, filmed, tested, or explained to strangers. This is where the story changes temperature. The science gave the bouncing stones a mechanical answer. Heat, pressure, dense rock, clean impact. You can follow that. You can hear it in the sharp crack of stone on stone. But cultural protocol asks a different kind of discipline. It asks whether understanding the rebound gives a visitor any right to treat the beach like a workshop. If you stand there in your imagination for a moment, the contrast is uncomfortable. Behind you, the rainforest is loud with insects and wet leaves. In front of you, the tide moves around dark pebbles, washing them, hiding them, revealing them again. In your hand is one of the stones everyone came to see. It feels solid, quiet, harmless, until you remember that the place has already told you in more than one language to be careful. Many visitors were not careful. They took the stones anyway, the same rounded pieces that made the rebound possible. After those pebbles left the beach, another kind of evidence began to appear in parcels, letters, and nervous apologies sent back from far away. Those parcels are the part of the story people tend to remember because they sound like folklore behaving like paperwork. A stone leaves Thornton Beach in someone's luggage. It sits on a shelf, or in a drawer, or on a desk beside holiday photos. Then life turns rough, as life often does. A job falls apart, a car accident rattles the family, a run of illness, debt, arguments, bad timing, and suddenly that little dark pebble feels heavier than it did on the beach. No careful narrator should tell you those stones caused the trouble. That would be too easy and too dishonest. People look for patterns when they feel guilty. Coincidence can dress itself up very convincingly after the fact, but the behavior is the interesting evidence here. Some visitors became uneasy enough to wrap the stones, write apologetic notes, and send them back toward far north Queensland. You can picture one of those packages being opened, brown paper softened by travel, tape peeled away. Inside, a smooth stone with the faint smell of cardboard and dust, and a message from someone far away saying in one form or another, "I should not have taken this." The same kind of returned rock stories have been reported at Uluru, where visitors also mailed back pieces after deciding the souvenir was no longer worth the feeling attached to it. For Thornton Beach, the returned stones did something strange. They made the legend travel in reverse. The object went out as proof of a bouncing trick, then came back as proof of regret. Once enough, people had taken, tested, doubted, and returned them. Protecting the beach quietly became more important than proving the rebound one more time. By then, the question around Thornton Beach had shifted. The old argument was whether the stones really bounced. The newer question was what kind of attention the place could survive. A beach can absorb waves for a very long time. It cannot keep absorbing visitors who arrive to test its rarest pieces and leave with them in their bags. So the response around the site became quieter than people expect from a famous natural oddity. There was no need to turn the shore into a loud attraction, no need to build the whole story around repeated demonstrations. The science had already done its work. The 1984 paper had given the rebound a grounded explanation. The cultural protocols had made clear that this was not an open playground. The returned stones showed that even a souvenir could become a problem long after it left the sand. Restriction makes sense here. It can feel frustrating if you only came for the trick. You imagine the sharp clap of stone on stone, the pebble jumping back, the quick laugh of disbelief. But protection often looks dull from the outside. A closed path, a warning, a local guide choosing what not to show, a place left quieter than the internet wants it to be. Listen closely, though, and that quiet is part of the answer. The rainforest still leans toward the coast. The tide still drags small stones over each other with a soft, grinding sound. Somewhere among the ordinary pebbles are pieces of dense old rock, capable of that strange elastic reply. They do not need every visitor to prove it again. The final truth of the stones is in understanding how the science, the living law, and the legend all landed on the same strip of sand, and none of them made the place simpler. So the story ends in a quieter place than it began. No dramatic unveiling, no final throw to prove the point one last time. Just the stones left where they belong, among the wet sand, the tide marks, and the low sound of rock shifting under shallow water. The science does not weaken the wonder here, it sharpens it. A granite intrusion baked older rock into something dense enough, clean enough, and stubborn enough to send force back through itself. 3 geologists gave that strange jump a physical explanation in 1984, and that explanation still holds. The beach was never fooling anyone. The stones were doing exactly what their history had prepared them to do, but the fuller answer sits beside that. Eastern Kuku-Yalanji knowledge held the place as significant before television made it famous, and before formal geology named the mechanism. Then the returned parcels added a third layer, people far away, looking at a stolen pebble on a shelf, deciding the safest and most respectful thing was to send it home. The real shape of this mystery. A rock can be explained and still be treated with care. A place can be understood by science and still be governed by law, memory, and restraint. On that shore, the strongest proof is the stone still lying there when the next wave comes in. The tide covers it, clears it, and covers it again. Nothing has to be pocketed for the story to remain true. If you want more grounded mysteries from Australian history, follow the channel and leave a comment if there is another place you think deserves this kind of careful look.